Okay, got him. A white car, looks like. Okay, cool. Perfect. Alrighty, Danica, we're here. Thank you, Aldo. Yeah, go for it. Southbound, yeah. Oh, this is going to be close. There. NOC from Alpha. Could I get an IFB reset just in case? Okay, 10-4. We're still in South LA. That's exactly what the police think happened. It looked like a fist pump from our vantage point, but the police think that the suspect in the white truck may have handed something off to a male who was standing on the street corner very close to Central and Manchester. So the authorities definitely want to talk to that guy. But let me tell you about the person who was involved in this pursuit. Initially, LAPD officers from the Newton Division tried to pull this guy over because the car came back as having been involved in a carjacking. And when they were trying to perform a high-risk traffic stop, that is when the suspect backed his vehicle into the police vehicle, and it is for that reason that this suspect is now wanted for assault on with a deadly weapon on a peace officer. This has been a very fast-moving pursuit until now. He's actually traveling at about 25 miles an hour because the police have actually backed off and gone into what is called surveillance mode because he was traveling at such high speeds that they wanted him to slow his roll a little bit. But just as I say that, I see one cruiser right there, and you can count them all with me. I see at least 4, maybe about 5 cruisers directly behind this guy, giving him a touch of room here though. And of course we also have the LAPD airship overhead. Yeah, he has slowed down significantly, but there were points when he was traveling at very high speeds on surface streets. He's been on surface streets the entire time. We are yet to hear him get on any of the highways, but this is the slowest we have seen him go yet, and is of course because the police have backed off just a touch. They're trying to give him a little breathing room. He seems to be familiar with this area. This is an area that he keeps circling, and to be exact, we are in the area of Manchester and Central, and he's basically using the streets that are either east or west of there. He's been on Manchester a lot for most of the time that we have been overhead. He's been traveling on Manchester, but also on Hooper and Central. He has gone as far east as Compton, hasn't made it any further east than that, but let me catch up to him here. He's just behind that tree there, and I should add, at this point, it is unclear whether anyone else is in the vehicle with him, and we only at this point know that it is in fact a male suspect, but any other information about him is still unknown. Exactly, and of course they were a lot closer than I was up here in News Chopper 4, so from their vantage point, they thought that the suspect was handing something off to this individual, and so it is because of that that they actually tried to track down that guy to see exactly what it was, if anything. From our vantage point, it didn't look like it, but of course they will be able to investigate that. They are directly behind this guy, about 30 feet or so, so they're closer, of course, and can have a better vantage point of what is going on exactly. But here he is on McKinley, just north of Manchester. These are all residential streets. Fortunately, he is traveling rather slow through this area. The police department is clocking him at about 25 miles an hour. Again, this is a suspect who is wanted for assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, that deadly weapon being the vehicle that he is traveling in after he collided with them during a high-risk traffic stop. Exactly. People are starting to hear about this pursuit. It has been traveling now for at least 15-20 minutes. And you see it right there. We see people there on the street corner on McKinley and Central looking at the pursuit as it goes by. And as you said, if you just saw this truck, you wouldn't think anything of it. You wouldn't think that it's involved in a pursuit. But when you see all of the police vehicles that are directly behind this guy, and I shouldn't say directly because it looks like they are increasing their distance between the suspect, it is because of those police cars that people are starting to realize that this guy is in fact being chased. And of course, the best thing to do is just to stay out of his way, stay inside if possible, and watch this on TV or online instead, where it's of course going to be a lot safer because, again, this guy already assaulted a peace officer. It's unclear what else he could do. Exactly. We believe that the original want was for the carjacking. From the initial information that I was able to gather on the police scanner, the LAPD's Newton Division officers spotted the vehicle, and the car came back to a vehicle that had either been carjacked or involved in a carjacking. And that is when they tried to pull the guy over. He actually stopped. He stopped for them, and when they were about to perform that traffic stop, that is when he backed his vehicle into them and then took off. That is when the pursuit began. And as I said, it's been about 15 to 20 minutes at this point, all on residential streets here in the South LA area. Hasn't made its way to any freeways yet. And at this point, here we have an officer getting awfully close. It looks like he was going to try a pit maneuver there, but you saw the suspect pick up his speeds. And at the speeds that he's traveling at now, it would be impossible to safely do a pit maneuver. So they're going to have to wait till he slows his roll down again to under 35 miles an hour to try it. They may be trying it here. It really does. When there's this many cars on the roadway, it's difficult to perform a pit maneuver. And of course, there's certain elements that we need. We need the vehicle to be going 35 miles an hour or less. There needs to be a wide open roadway. And he may try it here because typically turns are a great place to do them. But you see all of those other cars that were waiting for the light. It's simply impossible with those cars in the way. Of course, they don't want to endanger anyone else if possible. Yeah, there seemed to be a school there, and now he's making his way back onto Central, back northbound on Central, a street that we have seen him on before, and he seems to be picking up speed. Yeah, a lot of officers in the area, they go into something that's called the Code 100, which means that they stage at different parts of the roadway in case they are needed. They are able to join the pursuit, and especially in a situation like this where they are in surveillance mode, or they were initially actually, they were in the surveillance mode, tracking mode, which is when the officers kind of hang back a little bit, let the suspect roll around, and then hopefully when he stops, there'll be some officers close by. So they try to place officers strategically around the streets where they know that he may be traveling. Yeah, that was McKinley. I believe it's going to be at Manchester is going to be our cross, which is, oh, here we go, pit. And he just missed it, couldn't get the rotation that he needed, and the suspect vehicle continuing here. Yeah, picking up a little bit of speed because he now realizes what the officer was trying to do there. And I'm trying to pick up the street here. It's eastbound from Central on one of the numbered streets. Ooh, coming up to a car here. Oh, that was very close there with that PT Cruiser. Now southbound on Hooper. Southbound on Hooper, squeezing between cars there, just trying to do whatever he can to get by. And it seems like he's getting a little desperate rather, seeing all of those police cars there. And of course we have all this congestion here. Here's a spike strip. Let's see if he misses it. And yes, he's going to miss it. So he's still got all 4 tires. That's the first time that we've seen them try to use a spike strip. So that was the first one and it didn't seem to work. And now I'm hearing on the scanner that because of the sheer number of cars that are on the roadway currently, they will not be attempting another pit maneuver for the time being. Exactly, and that's why they felt comfortable about going into the surveillance mode. He kept circling roughly the same area, so they figured, let's give this guy a little breathing room. We've seen that he's just traveling in circles. Let's back off a little bit, see if he slows down his speed, and perhaps abandons the car and then runs for it. So that is why they were able to deploy that spike strip as well. They've seen that he has a pattern. There's a certain area that he's traveling at, and that's why they felt comfortable deploying that spike strip in that area. They were confident that he was going to pass by. And I believe I just saw another spike strip there. It was in the shadows, so you may not have seen it, but I'm pretty confident I saw one there. But unfortunately, he didn't hit that one either. Yeah, he definitely has grown in his number of fans, to say the least. We have seen people out on the street corners with their cell phones trying to capture the moment, which of course the authorities do not want you to do. It is always safest to stay inside, watch this on TV, watch this online. And unfortunately, in situations like this, what we have seen in times past is people will try to use their vehicles to try to help the police, to try to bring this to a stop. Of course, that is not what the police want you to do. They, of course, appreciate your support, but not in that way. Of course, the best thing you can do is just pull over to the right, let the pursuit pass you by, and then rejoin traffic once you deem it safe to do so. Yeah, unfortunately, unfortunately, that pit maneuver didn't work, but you can see that it did cause a little bit of damage to the rear bumper. And of course, because these streets are so congested, the next thing I heard on the scanner after they attempted that pit maneuver was no more pit maneuvers, because the streets are simply too congested. It's just endangering too many people to attempt another one. But I'm sure if they get on a roadway where there aren't any cars along the road, they can try it again. But no pit maneuvers for now. I definitely saw at least 2 spike strips, and those are the first 2 that I heard about over the police scanner, and the first 2 that I witnessed in person. I can tell you that he appears to have not hit either one, so he's still got all 4 tires good and ready to go. And of course, we did see him traveling at very high speeds earlier, so his car is fully capable of traveling at those high speeds. It doesn't seem to be damaged in any way except for the damage to the rear bumper, but he has slowed down significantly since this pursuit began because the authorities have backed off just a touch. But here he's running the red here. This traffic coming at him, they actually have the right of way, but they're going to stop, let him continue on. And here we go, continuing at very slow speeds. Eastbound Manchester. Yeah, and again, these are streets that we have seen him on before. So this is obviously an area that he is familiar with. And we say that because when we've covered other pursuits in the past, people tend to return to an area that is familiar to them. And the reason they do that is they know the streets. They don't want to drive into a cul-de-sac accidentally, or they could try to seek refuge inside of their home, inside of a friend's home. So that is actually what the police were hoping for, that the suspect would approach a neighborhood that he is familiar with, would abandon the car and would start running, and that's when they could safely take him into custody. But at this point, doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, I'm noticing that as well now. That rear driver's side tire appears to be going flat. So, of course, what we know about spike strips is they won't make the tire just explode. It won't bring the vehicle to a stop, but it'll slowly start to deflate those tires, and eventually the car will end up on its rim, and at that point, the suspect will have no choice but to give up. Yeah, a little wobbly there, but let's see what he does here. He is slowing down, and never mind. He's going to go down that alleyway. It's going to be east of Central, and 8-9 is the major, but he's in the alley. So Central and 8-9 coming back out onto the roadway here. Yep, right behind him now in the alleyway, which of course is going to put him into a residential street here. And he's coming out, he's just stopping enough to clear the road and then proceeding into the alleyway here. And again, this alleyway is in South LA, a residential area. We have only seen him in residential areas so far. And of course, this is a suspect who is wanted on a very serious charge, assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer following a traffic stop in connection with a carjacking. Absolutely, and it makes you wonder if perhaps, you know, this is a much larger car. Maybe he didn't have that much gas to begin with, and that's why he was giving it all he had at the beginning. And now that the pursuit is definitely taking its time, maybe now he's thinking about fuel conservation, because we haven't seen him go any faster than about 40 miles an hour. The fastest times that he has driven since we got overhead is when he's, it was right after that pit maneuver attempt, but otherwise he's traveling at about 25 miles an hour or less. Here's another spike strip. Yeah, and right there, they seem to have deployed not one, but two spike strips. So if he didn't hit one, perhaps he hit the other. From my vantage point, I want to say he did hit it. I'm listening on the scanner. I'm hearing that they did get at least one of the tires. So we already know that his rear passenger tire got hit on an earlier spike strip. This other one that he just hit may have gotten another tire. So he may be down to his very last two. A lot of people on the sidewalk, a lot of cars on the roadway, and it is for that reason that the police department simply said no more pit maneuver attempts after they had that failed pit maneuver. It's just simply too dangerous at this time, and of course, they want to stop this guy, but of course, they want to make sure that everyone is safe in their attempt to do so. But this suspect continues to travel here on streets in South LA, down to perhaps just his last two tires here after hitting a couple of spike strips at slow speeds here on surface streets. Absolutely, and even though he's going very slow, that still is very dangerous because he keeps running red lights. Like in this situation right here, just as I say it, he has a red light and he's still creeping into the intersection here, and that's what makes this so dangerous. He really has no regard for anybody else. He's trying to get away, even if it's at 20 miles an hour, but he's continuing here, southbound turn on Manchester from Central. Yeah, he definitely has gained a lot of viewers here out on the streets. We've seen a lot of people out on the street corners with their cell phones documenting this moment for their social media accounts, I'm guessing. But, of course, we also had that one male who early on in this pursuit approached the vehicle, and it appeared that the suspect may have handed something off to him, or the person on the sidewalk handed something to the suspect. It's still unclear at this point. I've yet to hear exactly what may have come of that on the police scanner, but we definitely witnessed it. There are people who are out here, and that just increases the level of danger on this pursuit. Schools are about to let out, and you mentioned earlier that we passed a school. So this is an area that is about to get a lot busier. We thought it was already busy. It's about to get a lot busier with people traveling to the nearby schools to pick up their children. And here we go. I'm going to zoom in here because you can see that there are a number of males standing there next to their vehicles under that tree, and the suspect just slowly rolled past them. It's unclear if words were exchanged, but suspect continuing here on Central and 90th Street. The strategy when it comes to basically the lead car is trying to prepare for the traffic stop, and so when they see that the pursuit vehicle is slowing down, rather, they're guessing that the vehicle is going to come to a complete stop, at which point the police like to have their door open so that they can go into what is called a high-risk traffic stop, which is actually what they already attempted on this guy when this pursuit originally began and when he collided into them. So that's the thought process behind them. Sometimes you'll see more than just the lead car open his door, but I've seen situations where the officers will open the door, they get out of the car thinking that this guy's going to stop, and then he takes off. So that really puts the officers at a disadvantage because now they're several car lengths away from the suspect vehicle. But in this situation, we still have that police car very close by my estimate, maybe 30 feet away. And I'm going to count them here real quick. I see at least 4 cruisers directly behind this guy, as well as the police helicopter overhead. Yeah, very slow speeds, and because we know that he has hit some of those spike strips, and here he comes up to a major intersection here. It's going to be Central. I'll get you the cross here. I believe it's going to be Manchester, where we have seen him before, and sure enough, it is Manchester, making a very slow eastbound turn onto Manchester. Again, he hasn't really gone anywhere further east than Compton, but we'll see what happens here. He has slowed down significantly. We see that cruiser opening its doors, like Carolyn was mentioning, but continuing on here, eastbound Manchester. A lot of vehicle traffic. It's almost surprising that there would be this many cars out at this time of the day, but there are, and that is actually inhibiting the police department. And there we see a young family with some children, so hopefully this pursuit stays as far away from them as possible. That's just something we were just talking about, our concern about all the schools in the area. And you can see just how congested this street here is. I'll get you the cross here. It's Hooper Avenue. Hooper Avenue approaching 88th Street, that's double eights, continuing southbound here on Hooper. Yeah, the officers are now very close, and that's something that they had actually backed off from initially because this guy was traveling at such high speeds. They wanted him to slow down. They wanted him to think that he was no longer being chased. So that's why they went into what is called surveillance or tracking mode. But now that he's traveling at such slow speeds, they feel confident in staying behind him. And I did hear them say after they attempted that pit maneuver that was not successful, that because of the sheer volume of vehicles that were out on the roadway, that they could no longer attempt any. However, you know what? I'll stop my train of thought there because I just heard them say that all 4 tires are completely deflated. So that could explain why he is traveling so slow. Absolutely. So that individual earlier who met him on the street corner, that guy got a talking to from authorities. It's unclear if he was taken into custody. But if you inhibit the police efforts in any way, you can also be arrested. We see it a lot when when people try to put their vehicles in the path of the suspect vehicle. But in this situation, we haven't seen anything of that nature. But of course, we see people out on the street corners. It's one thing to be out on the street corner, but it's a whole other thing to try to get in front of this vehicle or get in the roadway. And this guy is just delaying the inevitable. He's down on his rims. We can hopefully see this come to an end. Yeah, very slow here on Manchester and Hooper, down to just the rims is what we're hearing. I'm going to use my doubler here to zoom in so that we can take a look at those tires and take a look at this suspect. I don't see anyone in the passenger seat. That's actually the first time that I got a good view of that passenger seat. But at this point, I only see a male wearing a white tee. He did pass it several times, and now he's in the alleyway just next to the El Supermarket. You see him rolling there westbound in the alley, and if he continues in that direction, he'll just come back out to either the alley or the small residential street that runs just south of Manchester. Hopefully this... Go. The same exact area. We just keep making circles on Manchester, and then he turns in front of the El Super, and what we just saw him was he went down the alleyway. In previous instances, he's gone down to the street and then turned and then ended up in this same spot. So this is, by my guess, an area that he is very familiar with, and that is why he keeps making circles around the same area. A lot of the time, suspects hope that they can abandon the vehicle and run into residents that they are familiar with, either their own or a friend's home, and that they could seek refuge there, and then that would turn into a barricaded suspect situation. That's probably what this guy, not probably, but it is a possibility. But at this point, he is traveling at such slow speeds. We have so many officers close by. We have the airship overhead. It really seems like it would be impossible for this guy to get away. But just as I say that, it seemed like he was going to stop, but continuing on here on Hooper. I haven't heard them say that they're going to block off, but what I did just hear them say is that they may try to disable the vehicle with a pit maneuver. So it looks like that is now back in play. We understand that earlier they had to back off a little bit because these roads were so congested. But if the situation calls for it, if the roadway is clear, he's traveling slow enough to try it yet again. So we may be seeing that soon. If I hear where they're going to do it, of course, I won't repeat it because we wouldn't want to tip this guy off in any way if he has a buddy who is watching our broadcast and would relay that information. But when it happens, we will bring it to you. But of course, continuing northbound here on Central, and as you said, Michael, approaching Manchester. Exactly. Manchester becomes Firestone. That's where it changes names. And this is where we have seen him do this exact same thing multiple times. He slows down. The cruiser opens its door. It looks like it's going to stop, but then he just rolls on, and then he typically has been turning southbound on Hooper. We'll see what he does this time. Surprisingly, that was literally the fastest we've seen him go in a little while. His speeds, I'm guessing, are about 5 miles an hour at most. But of course, there were points during this pursuit when he was driving like a madman on these surface streets, and it is for that reason that the police department backed off to begin with, just to see if he would slow down a little bit. He did, but is now U-turning here on Hooper, back onto Manchester. Yeah, he's heading back in the direction where he just came, where we had all those people standing out on the street corner and that 7-Eleven that Michael had mentioned. I'm going to go ahead and widen out the shot, though, so that we can get a better view of what's going on here. You have cars all along either side of the road, and then those cars are parked, but then you also have cars that are just traversing through the area. He's set up to take the turn here. We'll see if he does, traveling at about... I'm clocking him at about 6 miles an hour. That's about 6 miles an hour on Manchester, approaching Central. It did, didn't it? Let me move the shot over. I have time there, but you see the cruiser blocking all of the eastbound traffic onto Manchester, and that's the direction that this guy was heading. He was heading east, so the cruiser had set up, and of course he U-turned there mid-street, so that cruiser was already in place, blocking that traffic, and when the suspect decided to make his way back in the direction that he came, fortunately police officers were already holding that traffic back, continuing southbound here on Central, coming away from Manchester. Absolutely, and I believe the car may be coming to a stop here, but of course he has tricked us before, so he may be stopped here. I'm going to ask my pilot if he could move a touch towards the right to get that tree out of the way, and unfortunately, look at the top of the frame, guys. Look at all of the people that are approaching. That is correct, right outside of that 7-Eleven. And Aldo, thank you very much. But it looks like he's going to stop here. My pilot, Aldo, doing a great job of maneuvering News Chopper 4 Alpha around here. But it looks like he's going to proceed here onto Manchester. Maybe this is where it's going to come to an end, but maybe not. driver door is open. This is going to be at Central and Manchester, and now he's going to roll away with the door open, and just like that, closing it and continuing on eastbound Manchester towards Firestone. Yeah. And now once again, making a turn onto Hooper, back in front of the El Super store. He's first going to come up to that alleyway where we have seen him turn before. If he proceeds on as it appears like he's going to do, he's going to be passing by 87th Street, then 88th, 89, and that's typically when he'll turn again and head towards Central. We'll see what he does this time around. Of course, we saw him stop back on Manchester for probably the longest time that we have seen him stop. So perhaps the idea of giving up is starting to enter his head, but at this point, he's just not ready to do that. Sure. And I'm zooming in here, guys, with my doubler so we can take a look at the suspect vehicle to see what the condition that it's in. Of course, we understand that all 4 tires are now flat after he hit the spike strips. And the police did attempt one pit maneuver, and you see the damage from that on that rear bumper. Unfortunately, that pit maneuver was not effective, and that pursuit continued on. And since then, they have not attempted any more pit maneuvers, but I have heard them say on the scanner that they can now if the situation warrants it. But at this point, there seems to be just too many cars on the roadway, too many people in the way. Even though the car is traveling at the ideal speed, they really can't do anything about it. It's unclear, but there are a lot of people there on the sidewalk. And there's our skateboarder again that Carolyn mentioned. So this guy's definitely keeping track with the pursuit. Again, not something you should be doing, but there are a lot of people out here on the sidewalks. And here's a car coming up kind of fast, and he just barely missed colliding with him, making a turn here onto 89th Street, which is basically as far south as he goes before heading back west and picking up Central again. Yeah, he's been sticking to the major streets for the most part, or either 87th, 88th, or 89th Street. But, of course, the police officers won't necessarily try to attempt a pit on a street that's this narrow because, as you said, there may be people out on the sidewalk. There obviously are cars parked along the roadway. So they would ideally like to do it on a major street where they have a little more wiggle room. But the problem now is that on the major streets is where you have all of the congestion and all of the pedestrians. So they will not attempt it with this many people in the roadway. They'll just wait till this vehicle becomes disabled or this guy gives up. I can't quite tell from this vantage point, but my pilot, Aldo, is bringing us around so that we can look at that driver's side door. This is going to be Central and 89th. He is facing northbound. All traffic stopped here in the area, but you see all of the pedestrians who are right across the street. The driver door is now, in fact, opened. So we'll see what happens here. He's opened it before and then gotten back in the vehicle. So we'll see what happens now. His hands are definitely up. And I won't zoom in here till I can see his hands. That'll make me more comfortable about this situation. But my pilot is moving us here so that we get the best vantage point possible. You see him lifting his... And that's not what they want to see. They want his hands up. They want to be able to see his waistband. And once they feel comfortable, they'll start calling out commands. They'll want him to raise his shirt so that they can see that waistband. And it is at that point that they will either have him get on the ground or they will have him crawl back towards the officers. I've seen both types of traffic stops happen. In this particular situation, it looks like he is... not necessarily following everything they're asking him to do, but we'll continue to watch and see what he does. Yeah, down on his knees, but such a busy area. getting down here on the pavement. So this is the most compliant we've seen him, but even then, his hands should be straight out onto the ground, and it looks like he's still trying to communicate with them in his own way, reaching for his head, things like that. That's not what they want to see. They want this guy to spread his legs, spread his arms, and now you're going to see this team of officers move towards the vehicle. They need to make sure that there is, in fact, nobody else inside. They are giving us the okay sign. That means that there is nobody there, and now this team of officers will approach the suspect and finally take him into custody. Yeah, it definitely does look like the engine compartment there is starting to smoke. The fire department will be on their way as a result. But let me widen out the shot so you can see what's going on here. Again, Central with 89th Street. So many people out in the roadway. Unbelievable is right, Michael.